So, can a single football match actually bring a government to its knees? I mean, it sounds pretty dramatic, right? But in Morocco, that's kind of what happened. The fallout from the African Cup of Nations, well, it did a lot more than just break hearts. It exposed these deep political cracks, and yeah, it might have just sealed the fate of its government. Okay, let's get into it.
After a really controversial final match, the feeling across Morocco wasn't just simple disappointment. Oh no. The sources we're looking at call it a profound psychological wound. This stopped being about a game. It became about the nation's dignity, and it triggered a response from the very highest level of the state. All right, so here's the game plan. First, we're going to explore how this moment of wounded pride kicked off a real soul-searching about Morocco's place in the world. Then, we'll pivot to see how, at the exact same time, the government got hit with two devastating political defeats in a single day. And that crisis, well, it was about to define its final chapter.
So, in a move that was highly unusual, I mean, pretty much unprecedented, the royal palace itself issued a statement. But this wasn't about politics or policy. It was, as the source puts it, a form of psychological consolation. A direct message to the Moroccan people to kind of soothe that collective pain and reframe the whole story.
You know, the king's message was way more than just, hey, it's only a game. It was a really strategic reminder that Morocco's destiny is tied up with Africa. He basically urged everyone not to let one football match wreck centuries of brotherly ties, telling them to look past the moment and remember the bigger picture.
And that royal message, it totally kicked off a much deeper debate all across the country. A sociologist, Mohamed Nanaji, he really captured the mood perfectly. He asked, how could one football match almost flip the nation's identity on its head, pushing some to look towards Europe and turn their backs on Africa? And check this out, because it perfectly illustrates Nanaji's whole argument. He points out this huge irony. Europe, just 14 kilometers away, has historically been the source of Morocco's decline, its dark centuries of occupation. But Africa, separated by thousands of kilometers of desert, was the source of its golden age through trade and culture. His point? Our future is Africa. Period. But you've got this really stark contrast, right? You have this forward-looking debate about national identity happening, but at the same time, the government is facing this immediate, brutal reality. While the people were looking to the future, the administration of Prime Minister Akhnouch was suddenly in a fight for its political life. And the irony here is just, wow. The government's crisis couldn't have come at a worse time because the country itself had a lot to be happy about. A 10-year drought finally broke, tourism was hitting record highs, and there was this major diplomatic win at the UN over the Sahara. So great news for the country, but a terrible forecast for its government. The whole thing really came to a head on one single fateful day. Prime Minister Akhnouch got hit with two massive blows. First, an international diplomatic smackdown, and then a crushing legal defeat at home from the highest court in the land. We're not talking about minor setbacks here. The first blow went down on the world stage at Davos, a very public snub. The second happened back in Rabat, and it was a fundamental rejection of his government's attempt to control the press. Let's break them both down. Okay, so blow number one, Davos. Morocco was all set to join this new and, let's be honest, highly controversial peace council led by Donald Trump. Critics were already calling it more of a political club than a real peace effort. Prime Minister Akhnouch was there for the big signing ceremony, but then, in a moment of pure public humiliation, he was apparently left out of the signing itself. Just sidelined completely. You want to know what makes that snub sting even more? The reported price tag. According to the source, for Morocco to even get a seat at this table, the entry fee was a whopping $1 billion. Think about that. A massive investment, only to have your leader left out of the photo op. Now, in all fairness, Morocco had its official reasons. The government said it was joining to help with peace in the Middle East, especially for Palestine, and also to build on its practical relationship with the Trump administration, which, you'll remember, had recognized Moroccan sovereignty over the Sahara. But man, this alliance was a huge gamble. It really makes you think of that famous Henry Kissinger line, right? Being friends with a superpower can be just as risky as being an enemy. By tying its diplomatic fate so tightly to one very controversial figure, Morocco was playing a really high-stakes game, one with potentially fatal consequences. So if the Davos snub was a humiliation, the second blow that day was a full-blown constitutional disaster for the government. Back in Rabat, the Constitutional Court handed down a landmark ruling, striking down the government's super controversial new press law.
And look, this wasn't some minor technical bill. Journalists, civil society groups, they all condemned it. The source even notes it was seen as a blatant move to hand the keys of the profession over to pro-government outlets and basically shut down any critical voices. The court just went in and took this law apart piece by piece, finding that it broke core constitutional principles. First, it said that creating a press council that was stacked in favor of owners over journalists, that violates democratic principles. Second, giving a total monopoly to a single publishers group, nope, that violates pluralism. And finally, it was struck down for violating impartiality because it allowed the same person to be the judge in both the initial case and the appeal. At the very heart of the court's decision was this key principle: self-regulation. The court sent a crystal clear message that a professional body like the Press Council has to be independent. The government's law wasn't about letting the profession govern itself, it was about the government trying to impose control from the outside. So, after getting hit with these two haymakers, publicly embarrassed on the world stage and constitutionally smacked down at home, the Akhenouche government was left incredibly weak. The source material basically describes it as a government entering its autumn, that final phase before the end. In the end, the source delivers this absolutely damning verdict. It argues that this government's legacy is just one of constantly trying to pass bad laws that try to get around the spirit of the Constitution, seeing it not as a guide to work within, but as some kind of obstacle to be defeated. So yeah, the fall was incredibly fast. Triggered by a football match, sure, but really fueled by some deep political miscalculations. And it leaves us with this huge question for the future of the nation. As this government's chapter comes to a close, who is going to step up to write the next one for Morocco?